Pentagon gave Anthropic CEO a Friday deadline: allow Claude to be used for mass surveillance and autonomous weapons or be blacklisted. The same week, Elon Musk's Grok got approved for classified military systems.
3 Chinese AI labs used 16 million fraudulent API calls to copy Claude's capabilities. Anthropic caught one of them before their model even shipped.
A fictional AI crash scenario went viral with 16 million views and actually moved the stock market. We'll tell you why you shouldn't panic and why you shouldn't completely ignore it either.
Big tech isn't just encouraging workers to use AI anymore. Google, Meta, and AWS are now tracking it and tying it to performance reviews.
Pew Research says 59% of teens think their classmates are regularly cheating with AI. More than half are using it for homework themselves.
And Perplexity launched an agent that coordinates 19 AI models at once. The same week, Anthropic rolled out enterprise plugins for Claude Cowork. The knowledge worker agent wars just got serious.
It's time for What the AI, all the AI news you need to know in 30 minutes or less. All right, let's start off with the big one, the fast-moving. I can't stay on top of this. Until recently, Anthropic's Claude was the only AI model being used in the Pentagon's classified systems: missile defense, weapons development, battlefield intelligence, the sensitive stuff.
It's funny that you call this story the big one, because I feel like every week there's like multiple big ones. And so it's like, it's hard to figure out which one is the big one. But you're right, this one's pretty big. So like, it's a contender for sure. But so significant contract between, Anthropic and the Department of War. What has changed here in this relationship?
I think it's like a $200 million contract, so a big contract. The Defense Department used Claude in January in the operation to capture former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. And after that, the Pentagon decided it wanted Claude available for, quote, all lawful purposes, including mass surveillance of Americans, including autonomous weapons that fire without human involvement.
This whole story confuses me to a great deal, because I'm like, neither one of those seems obviously lawful to me, but okay, that's the argument. So, and Anthropic said no. Hard boundary on those two things?
Anthropic said no. To be fair to them, they weren't refusing to work with the military. They've worked with them on missile defense, intelligence analysis, the Maduro capture. The lines they drew were specifically around autonomous weapon systems and mass surveillance of Americans, which are in the contracts they have with the Pentagon, the DoD, and apparently not being used for these purposes today anyway. So it seemed, relatively reasonable.
Yeah, it seems like, honestly, like a pretty reasonable place to draw the line. Like, you can use our product, but please don't, surveil American citizens, and please don't just like randomly and with no human in the loop kill people. Like, seems legit, right?
Yeah, you would think that's what Dario Amodei thought too. And then he met with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon and walked out with a Friday 5 p.m. deadline to agree to all lawful use, or the Pentagon would either label Anthropic a, quote, supply chain risk, which really means it's usually reserved for adversarial companies from adversarial countries, like real security risk. And it means other people who work with the Pentagon can't work with you, not just the Pentagon, or to use the Defense Production Act to force compliance with the Pentagon's request. I don't know exactly what that would entail: make a new model, change your policy, to like basically say, you're so critical to national security, we're going to force you to do the thing we need you to do.
This is such a weird set of options where you're either critical or you're public enemy number one. And it seems like you would be either or on that front. So it's an interesting set of options there. They had a 5 p.m. deadline. It's 9 a.m. Friday morning. Do we have an update?
Yeah, Dario posted a post yesterday saying basically no. He said, we don't. It was, I thought, a very well-reasoned post. If you read it, he said clearly it's not our position or any private company's position to tell the DoD how to do what they do. We don't think these technologies are properly capable of doing this without making mistakes. So we're not comfortable with the capabilities we have to be operating these ways. That's why we wrote these restrictions in the contract. And if that's not okay with the DoD, they're happy to work with somebody else. We'll keep the systems running as long as they need them. We'll help them with transitions of data or integrations to a new provider. But these are things we don't feel comfortable with Claude being used for. So if you need to do that with your AI tool, use a different AI tool, which seemed like a not totally crazy. I mean, he stood his ground, but he wasn't, trying to take over DoD policy or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think good for him, honestly, because Anthropic is, it's known as the privacy company. Like, their whole corporate, pitch and differentiation is put at risk if they sort of succumb to this one. So I think good for him for standing his ground. But tell me about Grok, because what's the Grok deal here?
So the day before Dario meets with Secretary Hegseth, the Pentagon signed a deal with XAI to put Grok into classified systems as well as Claude.
Dude. Okay, so that seems to me to like all the alarm bells on conflict of interest. Musk is a government advisor, competitor gets threatened with sanctions, company gets frictionless action. Like this is a red flag situation.
It does seem like a red flag situation. And, it feels so related to the issues with Claude. Like, was Claude not working well, or do we just feel like we wanted somebody who's a little more friendly to the administration having control of an AI system being put in? I don't know. So this one's still going to be developing. As I said, as we record this at 9 a.m. on Friday morning, we've gotten Dario's response. We don't know what the DoD is going to do. Maybe the simplest answer is just to switch over to XAI. I'm not sure it makes me feel better if they switch over to XAI and Grok over Anthropic, but that might be what they're going to do.
I mean, this is a menu of bad options, because if I was going to have an AI be making high stakes decisions, I would definitely prefer Claude to Grok, but I also just don't want that happening yet. But Lord help us if Grok starts surveilling us and then, hitting the go button on taking people out. That's a little terrifying. So
Why I would be a little terrified of any AI making the call to take people out. I mean, there's obviously a degree of autonomy and heat seeking or laser guided. I mean, all these things do things with somewhat lack of human input, but it doesn't feel like we're ready to just be having AI. I've got an AI bot that I'm writing that like is going to try and trade on Kalshi for me to find like arbitrary. And like, I give it like a limit of like, if it's more than $50, like you got to call me before you do something
yeah.
crazy. And that's me
I feel
trading
like
on
that
Kalshi.
is
I feel like the Pentagon bar should be high.
Yes, should be higher. That's appropriately risk on, Jeff. $50 on Kalshi is appropriately risk on. This Pentagon stuff makes me a little bit nervous. But I got to tell you, this was not the only big news for Anthropic this week. So Anthropic was fighting the Pentagon, super exciting, but it was also fighting on a completely different front. Specifically fighting wars in China over there. So this week, Anthropic publicly accused 3 different Chinese AI labs of systematically stealing its model capabilities.
Now, stealing's a bold word. Are we talking corporate espionage and hacking into their networks? Or are we talking something else? Like, what do they mean when they say stealing their
I
models'
mean,
capabilities?
Jeff, we're really kind of talking about stealing, but like legal stealing. It doesn't even seem like they had to work quite as hard as you might have wanted them to. But so the actual process technically is called distillation, and the idea is that you don't actually need to build a model from scratch. You can just query the big frontier models at a massive scale and then take those outputs that you get from them and feed it into your own trading pipeline. And so you're essentially teaching your model to copy theirs. And that's what Anthropic has now accused DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax of doing.
All right, so you said massive scale. My kids love when I say massive because they just get this like little smirk on there. Massive, but like, how massive is the scale? What do we talk? How much do I need? It seems like the kind of thing you should be able to stop, right? Like, somebody can't just come in and take all your stuff. You would think. So, how big are we talking?
Jeff, the appropriate word is massive.
Okay.
Massive scale. So 16 million Claude API queries through approximately 24,000 fake fraudulent accounts. They built what Anthropic calls a Hydra cluster, which is basically just like this huge network of fake accounts that's distributing traffic all over the place so that they can avoid detection. So like it is a little corporate espionage. One proxy network was managing more than 20,000 accounts simultaneously.
20, that's like a serious, like that's a
Serious.
big infrastructure play. You're investing a lot of time. That's not the quick smash and grab. That's a seriously planned heist. This is Ocean's 11 style heist here.
It is a seriously planned heist, but still easier than building a foundation model, I guess. So that's why it's the juice. Juice is worth the squeeze. The part that really gets my attention, though, is Anthropic actually detected Minimax before it actually launched its model. So, like, Anthropic knew this was going on and was essentially just like watching the distillation process in real time from the sort of initial query all the way through to the model release. And then when they released a new Claude model mid-campaign, Minimax actually was able to sort of pivot within 24 hours to start capturing the new model capabilities and actually stay up to date in real time. So this is like pretty sophisticated intentional IP extraction.
Yeah, that is like focused, intentional, well thought out, well executed plan. I mean, you got to be impressed with that alone. And if I'm not wrong, OpenAI has made similar accusations, right, about people distilling their models.
Yeah, they DeepSeek specifically. So both companies going public in the same week signals something. This isn't just like a terms of use enforcement types of thing like we saw it before with Anthropic, but they're making really like a political and legal argument about theft here.
The political angle is interesting. I mean, we've had a lot of debates about U.S.-led AI in the world, China, having AI diplomacy or whatever, pushing their AI models, and then we go, of course, the chip bans going on that have been a part of this. So, like, how do I think about all of this, kind of political milieu coming together in terms of what's going on between the U.S. and China and AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting because a lot of the like argument has been if we can control the chip experts, we can stay ahead, but or exports, excuse me, not
Mm,
experts, but I mean, probably both to be honest with you, but the exports
right. Oh, yeah.
specifically, we can, we can stay ahead in this race. But if they can just like steal the data without needing the chips because they're just getting it directly from the foundation model, that's sort of like a new and different problem to think about. They can just sort of query and get the data that they need without the same sort of hardware restrictions. So it's kind of a messy problem to think about how to solve.
It is a messy problem to think about. Does it make us rethink how impressive some of the Chinese developments are because they're being built on more stolen foundations versus true innovation?
I mean, I think, yes. First of all, one might argue that this whole stealing process is in itself an innovation, right? Like building a model based on the outputs of another model. So
True.
I think both can kind of be true here, where they've extracted a significant boost or head start from the work that these other companies have done, but they've also done real research and work on top of that to create something new and different. So it's a complicated narrative, right? You're kind of like standing on the shoulders of giants here, and you got a boost, but you also are bringing some of your own capability in there too. So it's pretty interesting dynamic.
Seems like this will be a geopolitical one we're keeping our eye on for the next, not just months or weeks, but years, decades. It'll be interesting to
Yeah,
watch.
for sure.
Well, let's talk about another big, at least big in the story sense this week. A piece of writing that moved markets without being any news at all, a financial filing, any of the things that you would think should move markets. I didn't seem to have any of that. They seem more like, science fiction than anything. But there we go. It's called the 2028 Global Intelligence Crisis, published by Citrini Research, and it went viral this week. 16 million views on X and wiped billions off the value of US listed tech companies, all for what I would just describe as a science fiction piece.
I mean, this is absolutely incredible to think about that. Yes, a science people are so nervous and scared that a science fiction piece is moving markets. So, for the dozen people who didn't already read it, can you tell us what it is?
I read it, but it frustrated me so much I had trouble getting through it. It's
Yeah.
kind of a fictional postmortem of the economy. It's written as if it's June 2028, so actually very short, what I would call a very short time span, looking back at how an economic crisis unfolded. And the scenario kind of goes like this: AI-driven automation drives record corporate profits through mass layoffs of white-collar workers, right? But those laid-off workers are also consumers. Spending collapses, demand evaporates. The S&P, which Citrini marks as 8,000 at the peak, crashes to 3,500, and they call the underlying mechanism ghost GDP. The headline economic numbers look fine, but the consumer economy has been hollowed out underneath.
And then you mentioned, of course, that this really moved a lot of actual markets. So what happened?
Billions in market cap, just, company stocks just taking the nosedive because they're all obviously going to die because of AI, at least according to this piece. He did describe this as a thought experiment, not a prediction, but the market responded like more like it was an analyst's research note.
I know, and I think people are really scared. I had at least four people reach out to me this week and be like, "I think I need to switch careers after reading this thing." And so people are scared, but I think the question is like, should they be? Should they be scared?
So here's my honest take: not really. At least not of this specific scenario. One of my favorite things, I read a bunch of books that were recommending on forecasting, and people tend to um, overvalue the difference between this instance of a thing, like a technology revolution, and previous instances, and they tend to underappreciate, the history of what the base case, kind of what has every other thing like this done in the past. So when you're predicting like presidential elections, how likely is it a president gets reelected versus not? Well, I know you have your thoughts of this president or not, but like, mostly presidents get reelected. So you should start with a pretty high. And here, every other technological revolution, starting with, fire and farming, we've managed to find new jobs. The economy hasn't hollowed out. and we've survived. So I think that's kind of an underappreciated reality. And the reality is also that these things are always more complicated. They take longer. The human nature of these systems really mean it's a lot harder for these things to take hold, and especially the rapid way 2028 that the memo kind of lays out.
Yeah. But the anxiety, driving the viral spread is real, even if their specific thing that they sort of laid out here is fiction.
Yeah, I
So
think the anxiety is real. I think the possibility that take the agricultural revolution, like we really don't have 97% of people farming anymore. Like those are jobs that were lost. It's just that they're not unemployed. They found other jobs that is hard for us to picture. I mean, how many people now work on mobile apps? But like, if you told somebody in 2000, oh yeah, these people will all be working on mobile apps. They go, what the hell is a mobile app? So
right.
it's hard to imagine those scenarios, and so I think that's part of the difficulty we have in understanding what that future will look like and predicting the positive case, because it's just harder to see than the negative case. The other thing that doesn't make sense to me in the Citrini memo is like, if no one's buying anything, how do corporate profits stay high? Like if demand collapses, you can't have high GDP growth, because ultimately those two things have to be the same, right? And so it's kind of certainly you could see economic concentration increase, but the idea that you can see a collapse of consumer income and still record high corporate profits doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, this thing, I mean, you and I have talked about this before, but humans are so smart, but also so dumb. And it just absolutely kills me because it's not like we haven't seen this many times throughout history where some technology like totally shifts how people do work. And so far, we have not found the technology that means that like we don't need to do work anymore. We just find new work to do to support whatever the next stage of progress is. And I mean, maybe I'm a foolish optimist, but I just can't imagine that it's going to be any different with AI. Like, we're going to do different things. We're going to become productive in different ways. We're going to create different things. We're going to value different things, but we're not just all going to like sit around and be like, oh, we don't have to think anymore. Like, why would
Yeah.
we do that? But
It,
that's like not how our species works at all.
It's not. And in the other part of this kind of nightmare scenario involves really no government action. Like if you did see massive concentration of economic gains going to a small, like there are economic mechanisms by which we do that. If you saw marginal improvements in productivity driving people to AI over human labor, there are policy things you could do to respond to that. And one of the greatest examples of how this doesn't play out the way you might think in an intellectually pure way to me was they were arguing that AI agents will make real estate agents irrelevant. We won't need real estate agents anymore because the information will be all out there. And that's been true for 20 years, that you can go and find everything you want on Zillow or Redfin. And yet, when I bought my last house, I paid 6% to real estate agents to manage the transaction. And so those realities of the market are far stickier than a purely theoretical, well, this tool is capable. Like I found the house I wanted to buy on Redfin. I emailed it to my agents that I want to buy that house at this price, and I still had to pay them. And I think that kind of reality of how long it takes for these things to change, even if the capability to do the work is there, is a good example. So when they pointed to that one, I went, I mean, nothing about AI agents makes it easier to buy and sell a house without a real estate agent than the internet does, and yet we still have them. And so I think there's all those kinds of institutional human things will cause us to be a little slower played than we think, and likely we will respond to it as things are disrupted from a government and societal level. And it's, I mean, not that there aren't things to worry about, but I just don't think this nightmare scenario is a realistic way it plays out.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I had a conversation with someone earlier this week about that exact example with real estate and loan brokers, and they were like, I will never outsource real estate decisions and loan decisions to a AI because I want to have someone to call and yell at if it goes wrong. And I was like, that's a weird motivation, but it's, I get it.
I think it's real. And it's also when people talk about the SaaS apocalypse and like, oh, no one's going to pay Salesforce anymore. They're just going to vibe code their own version. I'm like, Salesforce isn't Salesforce. Those companies don't have dominant market positions because their code is just you can't replicate it. No, they have, because people want someone who's responsible for making it work, someone who they can call and yell at when it doesn't work. And so there will be disruptions to the way those markets work. Their margins may not be able to be as high. Their prices at least may not be able to be as high. But like, people aren't just buying a code base. They are buying a set of capabilities, a responsible party to interact with. And I think that reality stays true in many instances where you think, oh, well, we could just vibe code a replacement to that. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I'm a, exec at a SaaS company. So what do I need to be sitting with? What's your recommendation here of like, what's my takeaway from this Centrini thing?
Your takeaway. That's a great question. I mean, I think the reality is you should be tracking. Okay, don't get distracted by the doomsday scenario and go, hey, that's not going to happen. I don't have to worry about this. There are real disruptions. I mean, the reality of the cost For take Salesforce or any SaaS company, for example, like the number of seats they're going to have is going to go down likely, right? Employers are going to have fewer employees. If you're charging per seat, that's not good for your business model, even if you can reduce your costs. So trying to understand how these things will actually play out and what the smart move is, whether you want to play like Block, who just announced they're laying off like half their workforce to be replaced by AI bots. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but you've got to be trying to scenario play this out a little bit, and you don't dismiss the challenges because the doomsday scenarios are crazy. Figure out what like the more likely way these things play out are, and then how do you respond to that? Because I think these are real changes. They will be very disruptive, just like every other technological revolution. Like the mobile phone was a huge revolution. We didn't all become unemployed, but like it changed the way everything operates. It made winners and losers of existing companies. That's going to happen again.
Yeah. All right.
All right, quick favor before we keep going. If this show is part of how you stay current on AI, share it with another person who's not listening yet. One forward, one text, that's it. It's the best way to help grow the show. And this week's episode is especially one worth sharing. I think that every week, but this is absolutely true. I love the Dario. But let's get back to it. Annie, what's next?
All right. So speaking of what actually happens before any AI economic crisis, the Wall Street Journal this week had a story that felt kind of like Centrini's scenario in slow motion. Big tech companies aren't just encouraging employees to use AI, they're literally tracking it and they're tying it to performance reviews.
Okay, so this kind of terrified me, to be honest. Who's in this list doing this?
Oh my gosh, so ill-advised for so many reasons, but the big guns are all in it. So Google is factoring AI use into software engineering performance reviews for the first time this year. Meta's new system is tracking lines of code written with AI assistance. AWS managers have dashboards showing individual AI tool usage, and it's also a factor in promotions. Crazy. Microsoft and Salesforce are doing versions of the same thing. And according to AI consulting firm Section, 42% of tech workers say their manager expects AI use in daily work, which is up from 32% just 8 months ago.
That's moving fast.
It's moving fast. AI is moving fast. People's responses moving fast. But the thing I think that I want to flag, which I maybe previewed my opinions and feelings about this with my facial expressions, but what they're measuring is really like weird and the wrong thing. Like AWS knows whether you opened Copilot, Meta knows whether AI, was used in your code writing, but like they're not measuring whether it actually made you better at your work. They're just like measuring like form over substance, quantity over quality. It's kind of a weird thing here.
Yeah, you're tracking the inputs, not the outputs, which is really not I think the way you're going to get the best. I mean, you shouldn't really care if they're using the AI tools. You should care if they become more productive. If the bar should change if AI tools are helping people be more productive, then if you're not using them, you're probably falling behind. But measuring the specific tool use seems like an odd mechanism to get to that reality.
It is. I mean, and it's like if you're measuring inputs and not outputs, you could imagine, if you were measuring like number of emails sent or like how many Zoom meetings you sat on, a lot of people would be super productive and very ineffective, right? And so if you're going to then promote those super ineffective, unproductive people into higher level roles, I just think that's not really what you want to do to be able to get like the best workforce here. So it seems like a weird sort of check the box. I would worry if I were them that there's an incentive now for my employees to just like generate a lot of slop and rather than generate a lot of like really high quality work. So
yeah, so I guess the question is if you want your people using AI, but you don't feel like requiring it for promotions or performance reviews, what is the right way to get people more on board learning and actually how to measure if these things are making you more productive?
I mean, I feel like this is honestly just like management 101, which is why it drives me absolutely bonkers to read stories like this. But management 101 is you tell the person the goal you want them to achieve. And then you expect them to use the best possible tools for them to achieve that goal. And then you measure whether they achieved the goal and how well they did at it and did it take in too much time and all this type of stuff. But you don't tell them, and along the way, these are all of the specific steps that you have to do to reach your goal. You let them use their own sort of creativity to get from A to Z. So this seems like a backwards thing here.
I'm not even going to respond to that because management one. I didn't know what the AI was here to give you management 101. But in case you haven't gone through management 101, Annie's given a good master class on management 101. There it is. Hey, let's shift gears a little bit, Annie, because there's not only do we see surveys about workers using AI, but now we got surveys this week. Pew dropping a study about Students using AI, the survey was 1,458 US teens, and 59% believe that AI cheating happens at least somewhat often at their school. And 1 in 3 says it's extremely or very often. And over half, 54%, admit to using AI to help with homework themselves. That's a big number.
I absolutely love this. It's the most teenager study ever. They're like, we're using it, but everyone else is using it to cheat, but I'm using it legit. Like, that's what basically every respondent said.
Well, they're probably both can be true, but yeah, it is that was funny. I think the question here is like, what are schools going to do about this, right? Like a lot of them are don't use it. I see that a lot of my kids' school, like just don't use the tool, and I'm like, that doesn't seem like the right answer here. But what are schools to do in this scenario?
I mean, I don't know, but if the right answer is when they go work at Google after this, they're going to be measured on how much they actually use it. The schools are teaching them the wrong thing in terms of preparedness for the workforce. But yeah, like I think the thing I noticed with my own uh child who's an 18-year-old senior, the teachers all think they have these tools that are going to like detect whether AI was used or not, and those tools are not that great. Like they
Yeah,
can't really detect it. So I don't really know what a teacher is to do here, but I think like the bigger problem, and you've brought this up before several times on the pod, is like if your lesson was so basic that a person could just plug it into AI to do, did you really teach them something that they needed to know? Or maybe it's the lesson itself that needs to change, right?
yeah. I mean, I agree with you. My number one concern, so for any educators listening, the tools to detect AI usage do not work. They have a lot of false positives. They miss a lot of stuff. Like they are just not going to work. And every time you think it does, the new model will come out and they will not. So please don't use those because it's going to cause a lot of consternation among students and a lot of false accusations of usage of AI that aren't real. And I've seen that in my kids' school and it's bad. I think the reality is that assessments are going to have to change. Like homework is probably just not going to be a good usage of assessments anymore. And I think we're going to see blue books come back, physically writing things in class, oral examinations. And I know people will say, well, some kids are better at speaking than other kids, and it's not a representation of intelligence or understanding. I'm like, some kids are better at writing than other kids. Like these are all things that are different and will need multifaceted. But I think you're going to need to put students in an environment where they can't use AI to figure out if they can answer these questions without AI. That's just the reality. And we're going to have to accept that and move from there.
Yeah, okay. Well, I already gave you management 101. Now you're giving education 101. But I think the same through line applies, which is like if you're an educator, figure out what the end goal is and then let the kid use whatever he needs to use to get to the end goal. But make sure the end goal is not worthwhile and not like, or that is worthwhile and not just like checking boxes and cranking widgets because we don't really need to do that anymore. No more widget cranking for humans. All right. Well, let's close the loop on the week with two agent platform launches that hit within 24 hours of each other. And I think they're worth putting both side by side because they represent two different bets on how enterprise AI gets used.
All right, hit me up. Who launched what? What we get?
Who launched what? Well, Anthropic, once again, Anthropic had a big week. Anthropic rolled out a major update to Claude Cowork, enterprise plugins connecting to Google Drive, Gmail, DocuSign, FactSet, Salesforce. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Wow.
Role-specific agents for finance, HR, engineering, legal, operations. So role-specific, lots of integrations, private plugin marketplaces that companies can build and control. VentureBeat's headline was Claude Code transformed programming. Now Claude Co-work is coming for the rest of the enterprise. Enterprise software stacks, ServiceNow, Salesforce, Snowflake, all sold off on this news.
I got to tell you, I'm not sure about the sell-offs. That's a different debate for a different day. But I have started using Code and Cowork, and it is a step function change in capability. And plugging it into your enterprise applications is just going to take what you can do with that kind of agentic harness around the model so much more productive. But if you haven't used one of these harnesses, Code or Cowork are really the best two right now. It's as different as using Google and ChatGPT to do internet and informational searches as it's that different in terms of the capability versus just using a chatbot. So these are remarkable. And I think the plugins for integrations to enterprise will be pretty dramatic in terms of improved use cases. What's the second piece of news? Who else dropped an agentic thing this week?
Perplexity launched, you're going to love this, Computer. That's the name of an agent
Love
that
it.
orchestrates 19 AI models simultaneously. Claude Opus 4.6 handles the reasoning layer, then sub agents powered by Gemini, Grok, ChatGPT 5.2 handle coding, research, and image generation. So they're like lighter tasks. And you give it a project, it breaks it into component parts, assigns the best model to each component, and then delivers the finished output. So for $200 a month for Perplexity Max subscribers to take advantage of this.
It sounds cool. I love the multi-model thing. I have, I only have one $200 a month AI subscription in my life, and right now it's not Perplexity, so I haven't gotten to play with this. I got to be honest, Perplexity's kind of fallen off my radar of late. So interesting to see them get into this game with a multi-model approach that goes across different, Claude and Grok and different companies' models. We'll see if they can get adoption, but it's very clear that this kind of agentic harness around the models and multi-model, multi-tool call is the future, and it is remarkably different than using a chatbot. So I'm excited about it. It certainly changed the way I prepare for this podcast a lot because, man, Claude can do a much bigger chunk of that work for me now than it used to. But we'll have to see who can actually get people to use it.
That's right.
All right, what a week. There's a lot of stuff. Pentagon ultimatums, AI, IP theft, fictional memos moving markets, AI performance reviews. I mean, there's lots of stuff going on. It's an exciting one.
Yep. And you got to be one of the companies and leaders who understand this dynamic early and is thinking about being proactive here instead of reacting when someone else sets the terms. So being proactive and being ahead of the game is what is going to be the winning strategy here.
All right, that's it for What the AI this week. We're on all the major podcast platforms, and we'd love a review or a share if you've got a minute. And until then, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.